Shalom, good afternoon. Yaakov, I'm not used to such a warm introduction coming from the UN. It's quite different over there. It is a pleasure to be here today with so many good friends. When in the UN I see a big crowd of people gathering together to speak about Israel, it's a sign for problems. But I hope it is not the case here today. Let me first thank Steve Lindy. Dr. Wu just told us that he is not retiring. We are very happy about it. We want to thank Steve for his great work in the Jerusalem Post. Let me wish Yaakov Katz much success in his new challenging position. My friends, when I was appointed to the position at the UN, I heard from so many people that the UN is biased, that the UN is disgraceful. After 7 months in the position, which feels like 7 years, I can tell you that all the people that talked to me about the UN were mistaken. They were too polite about what they told me about the UN. In the UN of today, they accuse Israel of everything and anything. It is absurd. We hear it all the time, that Israel is a cause for violence in the Middle East. Not ISIS, not Assad, not the incitement, but we are. I have to say, there are many New Yorkers here in the crowd, and in New York I found a warm, strong Jewish community. But when I cross First Avenue every morning, it is a different universe entering the halls of the UN. In the upside-down world of the UN, it makes sense to pass 22 resolutions against Israel and 0 resolutions against Syria. This is the reality of the UN today. Israel has faced daily terror attacks. We all seen the stabbings and the shootings. What is the UN response? Blame the victims and excuse the killers. And they tell us, many officials in the UN, you have to understand Palestinian terrorism. It's natural. To some UN officials, it's human nature, that's what they say, human nature to grab a knife and to stab a Jew, any Jew. It doesn't end with that. The UN's commissions on the status of women blamed Israel for domestic violence by Palestinian men against Palestinian women. Can you believe it? Some in the UN even blame us for climate change. It's not a joke. It's not a joke, it's a reality. You come to a committee and at the end of the discussion, they will blame Israel. Friends, there is no rational explanation for what we are facing at the UN. It is not based on facts or evidence. It is purely an obsession. We all know about it. It is not new to us. But today I want to share with you something new about the UN, something that is not being reported yet. And I think every supporter of Israel should be aware of that. The Palestinians and their supporters are injecting anti-Semitism into the UN. With all the years of bias and hostility, we knew about the hypocrisy at the UN. But I didn't think it will come to the position where we are today. The Palestinians have crossed the line. And let me give you a few examples. The Palestinian representative to the UN, Mr. Riyad Mansour, only recently compared us, the Israelis, to the Nazis. Can you imagine that? When we heard those allegations from crackpots in the streets, we didn't accept it. But to think about diplomats in the United Nations, the Parliament of Nations, allowing such a language, how dare he suggest that Palestinian terrorists are like the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto. How disgraceful to compare cold-blooded killers who kill innocent Israelis, women and children, to Jews who fought the Nazis. Shame on him. Shame on Representative Mansour for saying that. This was not the first time Mr. Mansour used such a language. A few months ago, he wrote a letter to the Security Council, outrageous letter, where he accused Israel of harvesting the organs of Palestinian terrorists. We had a debate whether to give the bodies of the terrorists back to their families or not. The government decided to give back the families. The same day he sent that letter to the members of the Security Council. This is a blood libel, a 21st century blood libel. This is the same kind of accusation that anti-Semites have used against the Jews before the pogroms. This is the same kind of incitement we learned about. And it's happening today at the UN. But in 2016, in the face of the new anti-Semitism at the UN here in New York, no one spoke out against it. Not a word about these disgraceful incidents. Not from the Secretary General, not from the Security Council, and not from the Human Rights Council. Some reporter, it was not from the Jerusalem Post, asked the spokesperson for the Secretary General about it. And let me quote what was his response. He said, the remarks were, and I quote, not helpful to the peace process. That's it, not helpful. Friends, UN officials and diplomats are staying silent about this new anti-Semitism in the UN, but we want to stay silent is to legitimize it, and we have to speak out. All of us here, we have to speak out. We have to speak out when we use slander and lies used as a cover for anti-Semitism. We have to speak out when the Human Rights Council creates a blacklist of companies in Judea and Samaria, in Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Who would have imagined 70 years after the Holocaust that the UN would create lists to encourage boycott of Jewish companies? We have to speak out and we must fight back. Some people are naive. They believe that the most outrageous criticism of Israel is legitimate because of the settlements, because of frustrations, or all other excuses. My friends, it is not legitimate. We have to tell them what we are facing now is not about politics. It's not about left or right. It is about hatred. It is about singling out Israel. It is about scapegoating Israel. It's about anti-Semitism, pure and simple. I was not quiet about it. I met Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General. I raised it in every meeting with my colleagues, the ambassadors, and I will continue to do so. Unfortunately, it was not only the Palestinian representative using such language. 2 weeks ago, the ambassador from Venezuela asked on the floor of the Security Council, and I quote, "Is Israel trying to carry out a final solution against the Palestinians?" Can you believe it? When I heard that, I immediately demanded a clear apology for this outrageous remark. At first, He saw the other ambassador's response, so he gave a vague apology. That night he called me, very late at night, even though we do not speak and we do not have bilateral relations. He called me to apologize. I told him, Mr. Ambassador, don't apologize to me, apologize to the State of Israel. Apologize to the Jewish people, and do it publicly, not over the phone. And after a few days, so he did. I assure you, every time we hear hate and attacks against the Jewish people, against the state of the Jewish people, we will respond. We will continue to respond for every lie. We cannot allow anti-Semitism to become the official language of the UN. We all know what's happening around the world. We all see the trends. You heard it here in the Jerusalem Post conference. We cannot allow it to become normal, not in the UN and not anywhere else. Today, as we speak, there is an organized, well-funded campaign against Israel, growing stronger every day in campuses, in the UN, in different locations, here and around the world. A movement that spreads hatred, a movement that lies about Israel, a movement that calls for the boycott of the Jewish people. My friends, you all know this movement, BDS. BDS hides behind the mask of civil rights, liberty, peace. It is a lie. BDS is a modern day of anti-Semitism. We are at the UN leading the battle against BDS in the halls of the UN. We are organizing next week the first ever International Student Summit to fight BDS. Next Tuesday, over 1,000 Jewish students will meet professionals from all fields, communications, public diplomacy, to discuss how we can fight and win BDS. And we will do it inside the UN, in the General Assembly of the UN, where we will send a clear message that we are here to fight and we are here to win the BDS movement. There is another important way to fight anti-Semitism at the UN, and that is the positive approach, to bring Zionism and to bring Judaism into the halls of the UN. And that's what we are doing. Before Passover, we held a Leila Seder. We held a Passover Seder for the diplomats and UN officials. And you will be amazed to see how many people showed up and sat down for 2 hours and learn about the Jewish heritage while eating matzot, drinking wine, and reading from the Haggadah. We had a concert in the UN with Shimon Buskila, one of my favorite famous singers and songwriters in Israel, where we celebrated the heritage of Jews who fled Arab countries. We can tell the story of Israel in different ways, and we're doing it. Recently, on Yom HaAtzmaut, we invited the ambassadors to the show Fiddler on the Roof in Broadway. And they sat down for 3 hours and learned about the Jewish heritage. And this is a way to convey the message, to build bridges and partnership with new countries. For years, the Israeli mission to the UN asked the UN to recognize Yom Kippur as an official holiday. In the UN, they recognized Eid al-Fitr, they recognized Christmas, but they were not willing to recognize one holiday for the Jewish people. Today, I am happy to tell you, under my watch, Yom Kippur is finally an official holiday at the UN. You all know that in Yom Kippur we go to the shul, we repent, we do tshuva. So today also in the UN they will have one day to do tshuva and to repent. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I want to share with you a story that happened 30 years ago. An Israeli ambassador to the UN went to see the Lubavitcher rabbi to get a blessing. The rabbi spoke to him in Hebrew and told him, אתה הולך לבית של שקרים. תזכור ששם במקום חשוך לגמרי, אם תדליק נר אחד קטן, האור ייראה למרחוק וכולם יראו אותו. The rabbi told the ambassador, you are going to a house of lies. Just remember that in that dark place, if you light one small candle, everyone will see it. That ambassador was Benjamin Netanyahu, our prime minister. Today, when I have the honor to represent Israel and the Jewish people in the halls of the United Nations, I carry the message of the Rabbi with me, and I will continue to walk proud and tall, representing the state of Israel and the Jewish people in that place. Thank you very much.